Hello and welcome to this podcast episode. Today I am talking to Mikael Krogerus. Krogerus, is that good?
That's perfect.
Yeah. Okay, good. And you are a Swedish, German, Swiss person. Something like that, right?
Yeah, actually, I'm Finnish. I'm from Finland.
Finnish. That was it. Finnish, yes.
So since my mother tongue is Swedish, and since I work in Switzerland, and I used to live in Germany for a long time, I like the description of Finnish, Swedish, Swiss, German. That's good.
I used to have. I worked in several jobs and mostly in sales marketing, and we had like partners in Scandinavia, so Denmark, Sweden, Norway, and we also worked with companies like Nokia in Finland. So we supplied them, and the weirdest thing is, for me, there is a big difference. For example, for Finnish people and French people, right? So if you have very opposite people in Europe, for me, Finnish people and French people are very opposite. And the way I explain is when we send out a parcel to either what country, right? And there was like something with the parcel, not something with the product that was in it, but something with the parcel. The French would make a lot of noise and complain, and we should improve that. So this was a shipping. I don't know what they are doing. So tell me something I can fix, right? But the Finnish people, they wouldn't say anything. They would just always be like quiet, and then all of a sudden they would leave you, and then you go like, okay, what went wrong? So, and also when I go to Denmark or Sweden, and I've been to for my practical year, final thesis. I was in Copenhagen for like 4 months. So the languages are very similar to Dutch, right? So it's right. For us, we can kind of understand what's going on. But once you move to Finland, that's all over. I have no idea what the signs are saying or what they are talking about.
Yeah, Finnish is very different. Also, the Finnish people are, of course, different. I think I like the what you just said about the French and the Finnish people. I always explain Finnish people the way my mother explained it to me. She said that if her neighbor offers her help and she declines because she doesn't need any help, she still knows that if in 20 years she would knock on his door and say, I need help, he would say, of course, I come over. So if you say something, you mean it. And if you offer something, this is true for a longer period of time. It's not about saying, oh, yes, I love you, awesome. So I would say, actually, it's Finnish culture versus American culture. That's where you have the big divider. Or as in Finland, the division goes between Finnish and Swedish culture, where Swedish culture is a lot of talk. And as actually they say that in Finland, Swedes are a lot of talk, but very little hockey. So that's the difference. Although I must say I am from the Swedish-speaking part of Finland, so the Finns look down on me because I'm like a Swede, just talking, not doing anything.
So culture is an interesting thing, right? So
yeah,
you live now in Zurich, in Switzerland, and I invited you for the podcast because, of course, the books that you've written. So we've just talked on the book podcast, and if you have the video, you're watching the video, can see me bringing the book up. But it's kind of weird because you can't see the title. It's embossed, so it says Machen. It's a German book, and thank you, because it was the first book that we got under what's it called? Sperrfrist. What's it in English, right? So, we weren't allowed to talk about before a certain date.
For deadline, yeah.
Yeah, so that was the first time that we got a book that early. So that was really kind of like honor. And we also discussed another book of you, Decision Book. And the Decision Book is really up my alley because I talk a lot about decisions. I talk with entrepreneurs about decisions. That's what I do. I'm a business coach and talk with them about the decisions that they are making. Not that I'm really change the decisions, but I ask questions about them if to get them confirmed that they're making the good decisions, or maybe should make a different decision. So I like the books, and I think it is because what you do in the books is because it's what I understood from Tom van der Lubbe, which does the bookcast with me, is in the newspaper, because I don't, of course, get that newspaper, is you have these columns where you have a short story and then you have these images, right? If you look at the video, you can see the images now. And it's always a well-known strategy or tactic or theory, and you just are very good at condensing it to like 2 pages with a really funny, interesting image, because the humor in the book is also very good. I think I love it a lot. And it's the same for the decision book. There's a lot of 50 practical decisions in the book, but they're all based on existing ideas and topics and theories, but just in a way that you write it down is that it's easier for people to understand. You can quickly read it and you can actually bring it into the practice. So thank you for that, for writing those. You have been studying a while ago, but Kaospilot, I'm not sure how you pronounce that.
Right, yeah, I would say it's Kaospilot in Danish.
Right.
So that was a school in Denmark. It's really hard to describe. I don't know, those of you who know Denmark, it's a very liberal country. So also the school system is quite liberal. And the Kaospilots is a school that was, I think, founded in 1991 by a brilliant man named Uffe Elbæk. Also a little crazy, but he's brilliant. And basically it was a school that said the world is in total chaos. So politically, financially, socially, but also personally. And would it be good to educate young people who are somehow able to navigate that chaos? And then the question is, what do you need to navigate in our world? And the school basically said you need these so-called soft skills, right? So the skills that you usually don't teach in business schools or in universities, and where we more say, this is just your personality. You might be a talkative person, or this is a good negotiator, or he's very outgoing. And the school said, what if these are not character traits, but actually tools that you could learn? So it was a 3-year education where we mostly worked on how do you work with people? How do you motivate people? How do you motivate yourself? How do you learn to judge your own work? How do you learn to give feedback? How do you behave in an intercultural context, like the things we just talked about? How do you deal with a Finn? I mean, people laugh at that, but if you look at your everyday life, this is what it's all about, because everything else you can learn in books, but you very seldomly train these so-called soft skills. And the school was totally focused on soft skills. And back then, I went to that school from 2000 until 2003. So that was class 7, only the 7th class ever to graduate from that school. And that was back then I was 24 or 25 when I started. And back then it felt like, what is this? Is this kindergarten, or is this Waldorf school or something? But the older I get, the more I think back at that school. And I think I have this gut feeling that they taught me a lot about how the world works, but it's only interesting if you put it into action. So the more I use it, the better it gets. Yeah.
They had a Dutch subsidiary as well.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah, in Rotterdam. What was that?
I think it was in Utrecht. I'm not
okay.
100% because I thought about joining the school at some period as well.
Oh.
I didn't, but it was on my mind. I looked into it. I looked in everything on the website and everything, but I think it was not the right time for me in the period where I was. And you did that. Was it together with Roman or not?
Yes, I met. He was on my team, on team 7, and we met first in these assessment center where we were like taken in. And I immediately felt, now this is someone who has sort of similar skills than me, because we both came from advertising. So in order to enter the school, you either have to come from work or you have to have a finished university degree, I think. And then you have to pass a test. So, and we all came from very different backgrounds, which also made it very interesting. So it was not only entrepreneurs, it was not only business people, but there was some scientists and some teachers, and very different people. That was a cool group of people. And I met Roman, and I immediately felt, okay, one, we both speak German, but two, he somehow is, he could be a competitor. And so we competed for a couple of weeks, but then somehow we both understood maybe it's better to collaborate. And then we started to form sort of an inner team within that class and have been working ever since. Yeah.
That's cool. So originally you did also university in Berlin, political science and government. So politics is interesting for you?
Yeah, I find it interesting. I find it very relevant, but it's not my cup of tea. So I adore people. I look up to people who are very political. I really tap my hat to people who are activists. It's not my thing, but I find it very important. But I studied in Berlin back then more because, quite frankly, I wanted to go to Berlin. So I just enrolled in political science, and it was not my thing. But I do find that political thinkers are more important than business thinkers in our time. So I find it interesting. Yeah.
It's funny because you find political thinkers more interesting and important than business thinkers. But the way I see it, your books are all about theories and examples or practices from business, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Because also I know more about it, and I talk more to people from that area of life. But I do think, I mean, I don't want to put against. There are two very important aspects in our life. But I do think that if you're really honest about business thinking, it's always about, in one way or the other, to make a profit. Whereas I think political thinkers, there is a broader goal, which means let's try to create a better world, or let's try to make a more rightful world. And I think this is, in the long run, this is more important than making money. And the books that I write, of course, are a more targeted towards people who work in business and not in politics. But I don't know, maybe there will be another book soon, which is more into a political direction. You don't ever know.
Well, the thing that I'm doing is, I think, is exactly what you're talking about. Because for me, business is not just about profit, right? Mm-hmm. You have to make a profit, otherwise you have no business. That's one thing. But the second thing is, I think you should have a business that really brings something to the world, that is making the world a better place, either socially or ecologically. So for me, it really comes close, right? So politics, the way that you describe it, and business, for me, it is really the new way is more like the European way, as I can see, the old European way, which we see in Germany a lot, right? So that the people in the company are really more involved in also the future of the company, right? So the family businesses are about long-term goals, about long-term survival of the business, and not about the money for today, right? You need money because you need to be able to pay the people. Mm-hmm. But other than that, you think about how can we make a business that is sustainable for, well, the environment, the people in our town, the people that work here, the people that supply us, the customers. So for me, it is really at the edge of both of those worlds. Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, I totally agree. And also what you see a lot is that sometimes in the business world, companies can change faster than societies. So for example, here in Switzerland, big topic is this, should we get a what is it called, the quota for women in leadership position. And this is, of course, a huge debate because it's such a conservative country. But there are some companies who just do it. So they're sort of changing the future as they go along, no matter how long it will take society or politics to follow along. And I admire that. And I also agree with you. These are companies that also take on responsibility for their role in our society, and they can shape very quickly the way their people live. And I think maybe in future we will see more companies taking on a so-called, I don't know if you should say a political role, but sort of a shaping role for our society. And I find that very interesting for those companies who take this seriously and not just do this greenwashing or window dressing, because that we all know that we see that a lot.
Yeah, I agree. We just, for the book podcast, we just recently read the book Anti-Fragile, Nothing to Let.
Okay, yeah.
And he also talks about Switzerland as a very good example of how politics should work, because it all operates in little sections, right? There's no one person who decides everything, right? And because you have all these small parts that decide, maybe it takes longer, but it also takes longer to make the wrong decision, right? So you are prevented from, for example, go to war with another country because you just have a big ego that wants to go to Afghanistan because they need the oil. So I think Switzerland is and you are in Switzerland, but Switzerland is a very good example how to become anti-fragile because of how you could set up a country, but also how you could set up like a business. If you have a business that doesn't think about becoming the biggest, but becoming the best, and you could set up like small businesses and to build a big one. So there's some great examples in the world that do that. Because you already mentioned a lot of things about the Kaospilots. What is it, the most important thing that you, looking back now, that you learned there?
Oh, that's a good question. I would like to name two. One is the ability, I don't know, but the attempt, I would say, to try and judge your own work. We were always asked when we wrote a test or delivered a project to grade our own work. And then it was graded by the experts. And then that together gave you a final grade. So in a way, you had to, the question was also, how good are you at estimating how good your work is? So if you always are dependent on feedback from others saying, now this is good enough, Erno, you passed it, then somehow you get also dependent. And you somehow have to learn to understand, now I have come this far and I know this is good enough to pass, or I know this is not good enough, or now I'm far beyond what I actually needed. And that was a thing that I found very interesting, especially if you're writing, because as a writer, you're always dependent on your editor saying no and praising you, and the reader praises you. And I sometimes think back at this lecture from the Koaspilot saying, do you like your own work? Because actually the question is, can you look into the mirror and say you are okay? And I think this is such a great goal in life, to really try to not please yourself, but be honest with yourself and say, I did my best, and not X, and Y, loved it. So this is a lecture that I always think back at. And I think there is a lot of power into that. And also I think it's very difficult to do it. So that was one key learning I think a lot about. Another one would be, it's about people. And this is something that every business leader will say, but to me, this really made sense at the Koaspilots. It's always, you can't do anything on your own. There's always a team behind you. Even if you are a solar surfer, there is a team behind you. There is someone looking after your board. There's someone giving you food. There's someone helping you when you're injured. And I think we should all not forget about that. Who is my team? Who got my back? And they do play an important role. There are no singular geniuses in this world. Every genius had a mother. Every genius has had a sister. and a friend and an enemy, and they all are part of our ecosystem. So I like to think about the people aspect in companies and projects, thinking like, what is the team that moves this? And if I'd like to give a small example, I think I love companies that hire teams instead of individuals. I think a lot of the tech companies, Google, do that a lot. And I think this is how you should do it. You should try and find a team that you work good with, that bring out the best in you. And then you should try as a company to hire that team, because, if that guy works with these two persons, they form a great entity. But if you take out one singular piece, they all decline a little bit. So I like thinking about teams and groups of people and how they perform.
I got a couple of questions on this.
Sure.
First, I really love the first part, being able to evaluate yourself to determine if this piece of work that you've done is good enough, or is it good, or is it bad. I think, like you said, it is really difficult, but it's really important to do so that you don't need external praise or whatever. So I love it. The second thing is, so what do you do to thank the people that are helping you, your team?
What I do to thank them?
Yeah.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, I think we should think more about it. Like, who is on my team? Who is helping me? And then I think we should acknowledge that and bring it up and talk about it and say, I can do this, but I need these people behind me, and they are part of it. So just to give you a recent example, I'm a writer with a magazine, which I do besides writing these books. And I'm a typical reporter. But in the last 3 years, I've started writing pieces together with a colleague. And this is sort of a thing that very few writers do, because you lose your voice, you lose your singularity, because there's someone else in there. So you have to cut down on your narcissism. And I thought this was such a great thing that I started doing that, because you acknowledge that, okay, here's someone else helping me. And why not putting his name under the piece as well, if he is helping me? So I, for example, just if we talk about magazine journalism or long form journalism, I think you should always list up the people who help you researching. You should list your editor, because these are parts of your team. It's not just one person writing one piece. This is ridiculous. No one does that. So yeah, I think acknowledging it is important, but also trying to ask yourself, who is it that is helping me? So being aware of people around you is, I think, the best and the first step to acknowledge them.
What a great learning. Thank you. The team, is that also the reason why for you it's so comfortable to write a book together with Roman every time?
Yes, in a way it is. In a way it is. And we started that back at the Kaospilots, just working together. And also, of course, for those of you listeners who work in projects or work in areas that are not so singular, you know that this is the team aspect is important. Very few projects are being run by one person. But there are jobs that are very singular, focused on one person. So working with Roman helped me a lot, because I realized he's able to do many things that I'm not good at. He's good in finance. He's very well organized. He's very structured. He's very punctual. He's anti-chaotic. And I'm all the other things. But we do communicate well. So he can appreciate my weirdness, and I can appreciate his narrow-mindedness. And I think there's a beauty in it to understand, here is someone who can help you become better because he knows the things you don't know. So that way we formed a team. And also, I mean, I'm mostly writing it, but he's reading my pieces and he's correcting it and editing it. And I realized it's not only about writing it, his editing is equally as important. And the same is with the drawings that you mentioned. He does the first funny sketch, but I always look at it and I support it, or I change it, or I criticize it. So going back to this first advice of mine saying, you need to be able to judge your own work. Yes, but you have to be open for feedback. So it doesn't mean that you are just on your own. You need to take in feedback, but you have to be open to your own opinion as well. And we actually practice that. It leads to a lot of conflict, of course, because we fight and we don't always agree, but we both agree that the process of doing this together is right.
I can imagine. I think it's I can think it's a beautiful way, because the discussions you have or fights sharpens the work. It sharpens the mind. It makes the work better. It makes the end result better, and it makes you better. So I like it a lot. You've written a couple of books, like the decision book, the question book, the change book, the test book, the communication book. But now your publisher has made like a series of pocket books, like I showed you the one Machen, but also Erkennen, Reden, Entscheiden und Fragen. Kommen die auch? Now I'm switching to German. That's what I was trying to do. Will they also be available in English in this form?
We don't know yet. So they have all appeared, our books have all appeared in German and in English and in many other languages. And now the publisher republished as a soft cover with also an updated, we updated all the theories and changed things and repackaged them, which is something I like to do a lot, because the things I wrote 10 years ago, I mean, they're mostly just crap. So you have to change your work and look back at it. I think this is the beauty of the internet, that you can actually edit your mistakes and also show it, like, this is what I thought 10 years ago. I changed my mind. I think now this, but maybe this will be wrong in 2 years. So I think we need to be very open about that. And we try to do that with the books. So I hope they will come out in English as well next fall. We're in the process of negotiating with different publishers, so I can't speak more about that now, but I'm sure they will come out, yeah.
Cool. That's nice. Because like I said, we did the bookcast about it, but I think it will be a lot easier if these books are in English for the people to read, because German is not a very well-read English language in the Netherlands for the friends that are listening here. But the book that I first read, the decision book, that was for me an interesting topic. I read and learn a lot about making decisions, making better decisions, improving the decision process. So what is one of your favorite of the 50 models that you have there for making a better decision in your life?
Well, I think one is a very, very classical one that I'm sure many of your readers know about. It's the so-called Eisenhower matrix, which basically tries to divide between what is important and what is urgent. And this is something, if you talk about that, most people say, I know it. So if you use two parameters, you get 4 different situations, and not important, not urgent. That is what we do the most. So scrolling the internet, getting coffee, writing emails, that's not urgent and not important. Then we have not important but urgent. This is things, that we attend to. And then we have this crucial area of very important and very urgent. And this is the area where most decisions are made and where most managers stay in the moment and really work hard. And we think this is the most important area, but of course it's not. Because this is where you burn out. If you keep doing all the important things when they get urgent, it's just getting too much. So we have to try and focus on the area where we say important but not urgent. So this planning or strategic thinking moment. And this is something that we talk a lot about. Many books are written about it. We all know it, but do we do it? I very seldomly do it, but I do see people who think and work like that. And this is very impressive when you see people thinking about things that will become important in 1 month or in half a year or in 2 years. And I somehow think that this is something I really need to read my own books and work on, because I always get stuck in very important and very urgent, and I know it, but I can't get out of it. And of course, the psychological or neurological answer to that is that you get a lot of dopamine if you do important and urgent things. So this is, you get the kick and you fix it and you feel good, but it's stress and it's not very effective. So I can give an example. On good days, I try to start my day looking at my to-do list. And I don't only write things down I need to do, but I try to put them into this matrix, saying what of these are actually non-urgent and not important? And what would happen if I don't do them? So, for example, not answering emails. This is a very simple trick, but I like to do it. Maybe just wait 24 hours. People just solve things themselves. And if they stay there, they will become urgent, but maybe not directly important, and then you can do it. And also then thinking, if there are too many items in my to-do list that are important and urgent, then I have to do something. Maybe I should send some of these things to Roman, have him do it. Or maybe just say, I need more time. So I think me a lot, but also other people misjudge our capability or our possibility to do urgent and important tasks at once. So this is a method I really, really like, and I really recommend doing it, but you have to take it seriously and you really have to work with it. And this is something I like about the models in the book. They are tools. It's not something you read and think, ooh, that was interesting. It's something you have to work with. And only if you put it into work, it starts showing its character. And also only then do you know, does this help me? I don't think everyone will need an Eisenhower matrix. There are people who do this intuitively right, or there are people who don't want to do it. That's fine. But you have to try it out and see what it does to you. Can it help you in your everyday life? So that's a model that I really, really like.
What I use the Eisenhower matrix a lot, not just for myself, but also I talk about with clients. Entrepreneurs tend to work a lot in this urgent area, urgent and important. And so it's like everyday business is every day again. So, but in the book, Machen, it talks about the Yester Box from Tony Hsieh, from Zappos. He passed away last year, but I really like that. I don't use it. Maybe someday I will. I do focus on most days, have like 2 moments for my inbox. That's it. And I don't open my email in the morning before I have done the most important jobs that I need to do. So that helps a lot. But the Yester Box, I thought, was a really great idea. Can you explain that?
Yeah, sure. So this is basically what I just mentioned before with the email. Tony Hsieh, he apparently, I don't know if this is an urban legend, but I think he actually used it. He said, read the email from yesterday. So no emails coming in today should be read. All emails from yesterday should be read. So you always have 24 hours in between for emails and questions and problems to solve themselves, because he said miraculously most people solve their own problems if you don't address it. So he said just give it 24 hours and also do it in the morning then, or do it at night, but only do it in a limited area of time. So in a way like you do, only 1 hour, only 2 hours, instead, as we all do, spreading out it over the day, because it will just kill too much time. So this Yester Box or Yester Mail, I think is a very, very clever topic, but it asks for a lot of discipline, because of course, emails are not only stressful, they are also a source of dopamine. We like it. We like getting a new message and reading it. And the minute we read it, we just are overwhelmed with, oh, I have to do this. I don't want to, but there's a new email. Let's check that one. So, I mean, we are crazy. One thing about what you just said in the morning, I mean, this is a very, very powerful habit, doing the hardest thing in the morning and not the easiest. How do you manage to do that?
Well, I think the most important thing that I do is also my to-do list, of course. I have 3 bullets on my to-do list for a day. So I have
Wow.
three important things I need to do, right? So Rob Hatch, he has a book that talks a lot about this. He has like a focus block in the morning of 2 hours, divided into 3 sections of 20 minutes. And each section has one action. So you have a to-do list of 3 items for that focus block. And the idea is that you only focus on that task at that moment, that nothing else. So everything is shut down. You just focus on the task. And he found out in a holiday, because before that he just worked like you just described before, like everybody else is doing. But in a holiday, he wanted to be there for the family, but he also needed to do some stuff for his business. So he did 2 hours of work before the family got up in the morning, and he focused just those 2 hours on the work. And he said, this was just mind blowing. It made such a difference that I finished more things in that holiday than the weeks before that. So he changed his way of working. So he plans a focus block in the morning, as I do too. Mine starts at 10 until noon. Before that, I read and I write. So I start by reading, then I start writing. I write in my journal. I write a thank you journal as well, a grateful journal. And then I start writing for my blog, right? I write an article almost each day. And then I start doing the 3 most important tasks on my list. In the afternoon, I do the rest. Some days it's different. Right now I have a podcast episode which starts at noon. So I had to prepare for the episode, and it takes about an hour for me. So that but still, there's like today, there's 4, as you can see here, there's 4 numbers right there. So not 3, but 4. But that's over the whole day. So that's not just a focus block. So for this afternoon, I will prepare my interview for tomorrow morning. So I have here speak the presentation that I did yesterday into my podcast. I have recorded that. I will have to put it online this afternoon. Prepare this podcast episode, do the episode, and then prepare the episode for tomorrow. That's it. So then Rob Hatch talks about having this on a sheet of paper. We call it A4, right? That's the size. It's not American, but you understand. So, and then everything that comes up in your focus block because when you have a focus block, what happens is everything comes to mind, right? So then you think, I have to do this. I have to send them an email. I have to answer that email. That because you're focused, everything comes into your mind. So what you normally then do is, let's do that email quickly because then it's over and it's out of my mind. I can continue. No, he says, you just use this white sheet of paper. Then every time something pops into your mind, you write it down. And you save that for another time when it's not your focus block. So that's some of the tricks that I do.
That sounds good.
That really helps me.
I think I'll need that.
And I talk about this because I teach also, I help entrepreneurs trying to use this, right? So having a priority list. So having one priority for the day. And for me, I have a list of 3. So when the 3 items are done, I'm happy. So whatever is burning on the background, that's okay. But when the 3 items are done, I'm really happy. So that makes my day. I can't say it was always like this. I was always this, but I'm 53. Probably age has a lot to do with it. And you become more aware of time, I think. So also my kids are older, so there's less going on. You don't have to take care of younger kids and stuff like that. So a lot of things happens probably in the phases during life.
This is something that reminds me of the writer, I think David Sedaris said that he, after he stopped drinking, before he used to drink and write at night, but when he stopped drinking, he started just to write in the morning, whatever came up, and then he just stopped and did something else the rest of the day. Or he did what we all know, he picks rubbish from the street. This is his hobby. He walks 6 hours a day in Sussex in England and just picks up rubbish and follows his neuroticism. But he's only writing a very limited amount of time a day. And I think what he means by that is that he cannot be creative 6 hours a day. He cannot be productive. and it's a myth. So instead of pushing yourself while not actually being productive, just let it go and do something else. And I found that very interesting. There's another German writer, Johanna Adorjan, which I admire a lot, who also once, just recently, wrote in a blog or on Instagram that she's only writing less and less every day and only in the morning, because it somehow doesn't make sense to beat yourself up about the whole day. And now you can say, of course, a writer has a lot of freedom, and also Sedaris is a million-plus bestseller. But I think also in project management, we sometimes fool ourselves by thinking that we can put more into an hour than 60 minutes, which is just a ridiculous thought. And maybe we should do a little less. Yeah. Okay,
I need to ask again, because I didn't understand it correctly. What was the author's name? Johanna
Adorjan.
Adorjan.
It's
a J.
Yeah, it's J, and it's an Hungarian name, but she's German. Yeah.
I got it. So I will put the name in the show notes. People can look her up. I think it's proven. I don't think it is proven that this is correct, right? So focus. You have a limited amount of focus. It depletes after a time. And what we try to do is just extend it. We have the really gift of thinking there's a lot more time in a day than than there really is. And we also have the gift to think that we are focused all the time, which we aren't. So I think most entrepreneurs have like the idea, if I work like 10 or 12 hours a day, I'm 12 hours productive, which is not really true. So you could better do like 6 hours of work and then just take the rest of the day off, or just spend the rest of the day walking in your office and talking to people who are there, because that will be a lot more helpful for your business as well. So I like the idea. And I think if you're looking at athletes, right, really top athletes, they do the same, right? Yeah. They have like 10 to 20% of the time they focus on the explosion, and the 80% is not rest, but it's relaxed work.
And also they sleep a lot.
Yes.
This is something that struck me. If I talk to top athletes that I profile for the magazine, I always hear that they sleep a lot. They sleep like 9-10 hours a night, and they take a nap. Of course, they also have a support network, which again brings us back to the idea of a team. But I think a colleague of mine always said, if you're in business, you should try to live or look at your life as if you were a top performance athlete. So you need a lot of rest, you need good food, you need good training, you need good environment to work, because otherwise you won't be able to perform. Whereas many people in business or in project management pretend like they can do everything. This is the idea of having more resources than are actually available. So if we talk a lot, there's a lot of talk about mental health and burnout at the moment, of course. And I think it's interesting because what we're actually talking about is not the clinical burnout moment. This happens also, as we both know, but there's another form of early burnout where people just push themselves too far without understanding that they need to cut themselves some slack, just like let go. You can't do more than that. And I think it's important to raise the question, how do we learn to do that? Because capitalism doesn't teach you that, and also society doesn't.
No. I think I'm training now for a marathon, so that means that you are running a lot. So it is it's not always running at your peak, but you run a lot. So you exercise a lot in comparison to my normal weeks. And I'm a referee for soccer, so I'm training like two to three times a week. That was my normal way, and then have one game each week. So that was pretty normal for me. But now I run more. So I'm tired. I sleep a lot better. I sleep more. I sleep a lot better. So the difference, of course, if you are mentally straining yourself, really putting yourself always at 80%, you don't notice that you get tired. So physically, it's easier because then I'm tired. I need to go to bed. I need to sleep. But if you mentally drain yourself, it's very difficult to recognize that you are tired and you need sleep, because it's not physical. You don't feel it. It's just in your brain. that it's just getting mushier and mushier, and you have no idea that you just produce less and less, right? So for me, that's an interesting find trying to prepare for this marathon. What was the most difficult book to write of the series that you've done so far?
Well, every book is difficult. I think always the next book is the most difficult one.
Right.
And that's just because writing is so super difficult. It's just hard work and it's not fun. I cannot recommend anyone to do it. Topic-wise, I think that the test book was very challenging. The test book, so that was a book that we did on psychometric testing. We wanted to look at all the different kinds of tests that are out there, from the MBTI, the IQ test, the emotional intelligence test, but also tests like how does you test your creativity or your ability to are you risk averse and all of that. So that was very interesting, and to us that was challenging because it was a completely new area of work. So it was almost like doing a study and like going back to university, but that was very refreshing. And I always like to look into, it was like entering a new room in a house. You lived in your house all your life and you suddenly realize there's another door and you open it and it's just a completely new world, and it's somehow familiar because it's the same house, but you've never been in that room, so it's totally new. And that experience, I like that a lot. So I'm looking for that. I'm looking for new things constantly. But of course, it's challenging because if you're in a new environment, you will do a lot of mistakes and you will understand things wrong. And this happened with the book too. So I think it's been criticized a lot. But then again, I think maybe that was good because it's good to somehow step out of your usual area. So I would say the most difficult book was the test book. Yeah.
Right. Interesting. I think that's the same. I see when we read books for the book podcast, right? You always read. We have a big list of books that we want to read, so the books that we know that we think is interesting, we think that are interesting. But also we get new books, and they are on a topic that we don't know and are very difficult and very hard to read. But these are the books that really make an impression, right? That really move you forward and really change your way of thinking. I like that idea. So it's great to pick a topic which is difficult to write, and you know that it's going to cost you a lot of energy and also time. But then once it's done, you go like, oh my God, I got this new pocket with all these ideas that I can use in all these kind of situations. So I think it all relates back to Kaospilot, right? So you do all this thing that is not easy to do.
Yeah, but still I still like that we have sort of developed for ourselves a way to do the things that are not easy to do. So we always go back to this formula of, I write a short text trying to condense it in a way that I would explain it to someone who has never heard about it. And Roman always tries to visualize it, not by making a fancy drawing, but by using these diagrams, because that is a visual language of its own that many people all over the world understand. So you always have two parameters. You never do three-dimensional things because most situations can be broken down into a two-dimensional, two-parameter thing. And it's not complete. It's not the whole picture, but you try to boil it down to the essence or to one aspect of it and try to look at it. So these are our tools, or the glasses we look at the world. A short condensed text and a two-dimensional drawing. And with these two things in our bag, we enter the world and go on adventures and try to look at new things. And I'm very grateful for having, one, a companion, and two, these tools. So I always know what we're going to do about it and not being totally lost, thinking, oh, what could we do with this? Should this become a movie, or should this become a book? So we always know this is what we're going to do with it.
Yeah, and I see it as a process, right? You have a process which is very, and you have a weekly column.
Yeah. We write that in a weekly column, yeah.
So you have a clear deadline, right? For me, it's the same. I have an article every day, but I also have a book every quarter. So it's a very clear process that helps a lot to get rid of the noise and all the other stuff that you don't know where you're going. And then you have the other tools that you just described, but the process is very clear. You have an image, you have a diagram, you have the text, which is condensed. Then you have the weekly deadline. So it's very clear. You have to just produce. It sounds very boring, right? You have to do the same thing over and over again. But just because it's a very clear process, you have all this creativity to discover and to talk and to learn, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think rules are boring. I think rules are a tool for getting freedom. I think if you have this is the old image, if you have a very narrow box, there's nothing inside. You really have to be very imaginative and full of fantasy to find something and see something in it. But if you look at the whole world, maybe you won't come up with anything because you see too much. So I think these rules, and as you said, deadlines, I think deadlines are very important for creativity, because it's easy to get lost in just getting new and more stuff. And for us, having this clear structure, at least for me, it was very helpful. And also with Roman, who's more the producer type and always pushes me and says, this is the deadline, do it now. I think this is important to know, that a deadline doesn't mean you have too little time. A deadline means you have to focus. And every tool that helps me focus is a good tool.
Right. You did your university, but then you started doing these interns and in writing. And then later on, you became a staff writer and also a copywriter. How did you get to writing? Why did you find it so important to start working in that area?
I don't know, actually. I mean, I remember that in school, in gymnasium, my teacher, my German teacher, told me, I mentioned to him, I think I was in 11th grade or 12th grade, so almost finished. He asked me, what do you want to become when you grow up? And I said, I want to become a journalist. And he then told me, well, good idea, but don't do it, because your writing isn't good enough. It's not focused enough. It's not. You're not a good writer. And I was very impressed by that. But then I forgot about it. And then I just somehow, after university, I just started working in advertising. But I was not in the beginning, I was not a copywriter. So I was on the other side, clients. But I always admired the copywriters, because they were so creative and so funny, and they were everything I wanted to be. But already they told me, yeah, you might be funny, but you're not a good writer. It's not condensed enough. And then I went to the Kaospilots, and I still sort of wanted to be a writer, although I sometimes felt maybe I'm not a writer. And then after the Kaospilots, I also, again, worked in advertising, but more on the strategic side. I was a copywriter, but it was a lot about strategic planning and writing concepts and all that. And then I felt like I really want to be a journalist. I would love to be able to be a writer. And I then, out of the blue, just applied for an internship in Switzerland with a very, very, very famous and highly regarded magazine, Folio, from the Neue Zürcher Zeitung. And I wrote a text and sent it in and applied for it. And my boss back then, Lili Binsecker, brilliant writer, she looked at my stuff and she said, yeah, you're not a good writer, but I like you anyway. Just come aboard. And then I spent 1 year there, and I worked with some of the best Swiss writers, and I learned a lot from them. I really must say, everything I know, I learned from 3 guys, Lili Binsecker, Andreas Dietrich, and Reto Schneider. And they were really good writers. And what I learned is, I might not be a good writer, but you can learn it. It's not only about talent and gift and genius, whatever. It's really hard work, and you can learn it. If you are willing to dig deep, and if you are passionate about it. And I was willing to dig deep, and I was very passionate about it. And I loved the topics I wrote about, and I loved the people I wrote about. And I then realized, maybe that's more important. Do you love the object of your story? Maybe that's more important than how well are you at writing. So that's how I became a writer. And I still see people who are much better writers than me. And especially if I have to edit them, it's ridiculous. I just say, very good, well done. But I still think that that this learning from my early years in journalism was that you have to really understand what do you love about it and try to tell a story about that. And this is something that we all do when we're sitting over a beer and telling people. And sometimes you talk to someone and you just can feel the passion and the interest they have in that topic. And that just is a good story, no matter if it's well written or poorly written. And I always remember myself when I'm feeling trouble writing, which I have a lot. I ask myself, how would I tell it a friend in a bar? And would that make a good story? And if it's impossible to tell him, maybe I should research more or take a different angle. So yeah, this is my story of becoming a writer.
It's interesting. Did you do the internship? So normally internship is either for free or for a lot less pay, right? So you took like a period of time where you had a lot less money, but because you wanted to learn how to write and become this journalist.
Yeah. Also, I mean, I moved to Switzerland, and back then that internship was quite well paid. So I was fortunate to still be in a period of time where journalism was blooming. So I was paid not very well, and I lived in a cheap place and all that. But I did get some money, and I wanted to stay 1 year and learn it. And they offered me to extend it. And then after 2 years, they offered me to become a staff writer. So then I felt like, oh, this is it.
Well, this is it, you said, but also you started your own business, right? You started Number One, a sport magazine. You just mentioned before that you wrote about these athletes. What was it? Was it just about writing? Was it also to have your own magazine? Was the business important to you too then?
No, I mean, what I always done, and this is also something that goes back to the Kaospilots, I have never been single focused. I always have different things that I like to do. So I like to write magazine pieces, but I also did these books with Roman on the side. And I also sometimes had a stint again back in advertising, because I found it very interesting to work in advertising, because you're closer to companies, you're closer to reality. You can talk to people you would never get an interview from. So I always found that very interesting. And then a couple of years ago, because I'm a big sports fan, and there are no good sports magazines in Switzerland. And I just talked to a couple of friends and I said, why don't we just do one issue of a magazine, and let's call it the best sports magazine in the world, and it will only appear once. So we did one issue, which is very huge. I can show it to you. I don't have it right here now. And we said, this will be a magazine that only appear once, and it will sort of make the benchmark. If anyone ever will again try and make a sports magazine in Switzerland, they will have to try to reach this benchmark. And we did that once. We crowdfunded money and it worked out very well. But we also understood that maybe there is not a market in a big print sports magazine. But it was a fun experience. And again, it was about the team. I loved how we worked together. It was a group of 7, 8, or 10 people with different skills and different backgrounds. And we all came together around this idea. So I think if you have this strong idea, this strong purpose, and you like working together, and we tried to organize ourselves only in WhatsApp groups, so we hardly met at all because we were all on our different other jobs. And that turned out very well. And it was a good spirit. And I think no one of us made money, but we all have a good story to tell, which again brings me back to my original idea of journalism. Yeah.
I think a good question to ask is, as a journalist, today it's pretty difficult to be a journalist and get paid enough so that you can live a normal life. So it's like an eroded profession.
Yeah.
But you have all these like you said, all these kind of like small businesses, like writing the books, giving probably also talks about the books, and then you're a staff writer. The books, most of the books that you've written become like #1 in various lists in the world and in Switzerland. So they were best-selling books. What do you consider success for you?
Good question. Good question. I think there are different types of success. I think one success, we have to be honest, is, do you make a profit? Do you make money? Because you have to pay your bills, and you have a family, and we have to support each other. So I think if no one is reading your work, if no one is willing to pay you something, you are not successful. So yes, I think financial success is one important thing to me. Another important thing is fun, which it sounds a little superficial, but was it fun doing it? Did I enjoy the process? I really, really think that the process is equally important as the product. So if the way we went was hard and not fulfilling and not fun, I don't consider the outcome a success, even if the outcome itself was a success. And the third thing is something we talked about at the beginning. If I look at myself in the mirror at night, was it okay what I did? Can I like say, do I like to put my name on it? Easily put. So, or would I rather have another name because I'm ashamed of it? So I think somehow thinking of, is this okay what I did? Is a third category that it's kind of hard to answer, but I sometimes try to do that and look at my work and say, is this good enough, or is it something that I would like to buy, basically? And so these three things, being honest with yourself, having fun, and making money, I would say is how I would say this is success.
That's a great definition. I like it a lot. Thank you very much, Mikael. I think it was wonderful to have a conversation with you after reading your books, and but also the insights that I got today with the background where you came from, but also what you've learned at the Koaspilots and working as a writer and becoming a journalist, and everything is very interesting to learn and to understand who the author is. And for me, that's always an interesting part of getting to know the author. Is it then also making it worthwhile to read the book as well, right? So thank you for this conversation.
Thanks for having me, and it was fun talking to you.
And hopefully we'll talk to you in the future, or either do a book of you again in the book podcast as well. Thank you.
Would love to. Thank you. Thanks.